Coming up today on The Story.
It was really unusual for a year to go by and have written 2 songs because I'd been writing a lot before then, and that was a real indicator that this was not a good season and it was just really tough. But they ended up being recorded by Planet Shakers and sung at church.
The Story.
G'day, I'm Jimmy Colefax. Welcome to The Story. That's the music of Grammy award-winning singer, songwriter and worship leader Mitch Wong, who was born and raised in Australia and now lives in Nashville. However, even though he's been tremendously successful, he is still largely unknown in his home country. Why is that? We'll find out as Mitch shares his story with us today. He's chatting with Eric Scatterbo in our Melbourne studios.
Mitch Wong, welcome to the program.
Eric, thanks so much for having me.
Glad to have you with us. And yeah, we want to find out how come a lot of people don't know you here. We're going to get to all that. But first, let's back up a little bit and find out, where were you born and raised?
So I was actually born in Newcastle, which is in New South Wales. And my dad was in the Air Force.
Oh, okay.
So he used to fly F-18s and he was kind of stationed all across Australia. I think we went to Sydney, Perth, Newcastle, and then we eventually landed in Melbourne when I was about 4. So I'm pretty much raised in Melbourne.
Kid.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I have to ask you.
Yes.
Your surname is Wong.
Correct.
You live in Box Hill.
Yes.
Many people would think, oh, obviously you're Asian.
Uh-huh.
But I'm looking at you. This isn't TV. This is radio.
Yep.
You don't look Asian at all. What's the story?
I'm sure I look a little bit like maybe my eyes. So I'm a quarter Asian.
Okay.
My dad is half Singaporean Chinese and half Bulgarian.
Okay.
And so his parents both migrated to Australia from, my nan actually came from Czech Republic.
Oh, okay.
When she was about 8 years old.
You are international.
Yes. So she landed with her parents in Australia at 8 years old. She went to Hastings, which was an immigration camp down Mornington Way. And then my grandfather came from Singapore when he was, I think, in his early 20s.
Okay.
And he was a mathematician. And somehow they found each other. And both of their families are very orthodox, Singaporean, Bulgarian, respectively. So it wasn't a popular marriage, but they made it work.
Orthodox in what sense?
In the sense that very traditional, they really wanted their son, their daughter to marry someone Singaporean and someone Bulgarian.
So there was opposition.
There was opposition. But
love overcame.
Love overcame. You're correct.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
So who told you all this story? Did they tell you?
Yeah, my parents told me, and I think that's probably just something about Australia is it's so multicultural, especially Melbourne. And I find it so common that I find people who've got a mix of all different nationalities and everything. So yeah, it's just part of our family history. I'm grateful for it.
So that's your dad's background?
Yes.
And your mother's background?
Well, convicts. It's to some extent from England.
Okay.
We're just white.
Okay.
So
British?
Yeah, British.
Okay.
So, we grew up in just a really cool family because Singaporean culture is very food heavy. And we love our food.
Isn't that beautiful?
And being in Melbourne is the perfect city for that because there's so much amazing Asian food. And my nan cooks amazing food as well. She's Bulgarian. So, yeah, we've just grown up.
I really would like to be invited over.
Oh, yes. And the good thing is I married Steph, my wife, and we'll talk about that later, but she's full-blood Malaysian. And both of her parents were born in Malaysia, came when they were early 20s. So pretty much my whole life has been full of really good Asian food.
Why are you not 500 pounds? I don't.
Well, Singaporeans have really good metabolisms too. So I've got a very high metabolism. I'm blessed. I mean, I've been in the States for 3 years and I haven't gained weight. I've probably lost weight because I was in better shape. Yeah. My metabolism is so funny. So I can eat pretty much junk my whole life and I won't put on weight. But if I go to the gym,
hate you.
Yeah, I know. It is pretty good. I'm hoping it'll last forever.
Well, we'll see. I thought that one day, but hasn't worked out that way. So, very interesting cultural heritage. What was life like growing up in Box Hill? On the east side of Melbourne?
So it was actually Wantirna South. That's where we lived when we moved to Melbourne. And then we eventually landed in Box Hill and then Mont Albert. But it was a really good upbringing. Like, I had both parents loved each other and just amazing parents who created such a good household. I've got an older sister who's 3 years older than me. And then when I was 7 and she was 10, my parents had our other sisters, they're twins. So it was actually a very loud upbringing. We had a lot of, it was the Wong jungle, we called it. It was kind of crazy in some ways, but we just had the best time. And I remember part of our upbringing was we went to church. My dad actually wasn't a believer when he married my mum, and mum was always a believer.
Okay.
So when he found Jesus, I was about 4 years old. And it just changed his life. And we started going to this local Baptist church. It's called Sindel Baptist Church in Mount Waverley.
Quite familiar with it.
Yeah, and we loved that. And so that was my first experience with church, was just going and Sunday school. It was so beautiful. And then my older sister, when she was about 15, she found the youth group for Planet Shakers, which is called Planet Boom. And she loved it and was just going with her school friends. So she just said to Mum, I found this awesome church. Why don't we just give it a go? So our whole family ended up going to Planet Shakers.
Oh, okay.
Pretty much 6 months after it started in Melbourne. It started in 2004. And so much of my faith journey has come from that, being in Planet Shakers, and just such an amazing atmosphere of faith. And I guess passion in music, and that's I guess a lot of what I do today.
So was it the music that you encountered at Planet Shakers? Was that influential on you in developing your whole love for music and worship music?
Yeah, so it was that in some ways, and in other ways it was actually my school. We had an amazing music school, and I was a percussionist all through school. So I would play, triangle, bass drum. I was actually the timpanist, which is the big drums at the back of the orchestra.
Oh, yeah.
And we used to play all of these classical pieces, part of the symphonic orchestra, we called it. And
now, is this a secular school?
Yeah. Oh, okay. No, it was Scotch. So it was a Presbyterian school. So that was definitely really influential on my, I guess, musicianship. Was being part of that all the time. And another part was in all of our school assemblies, we would sing these amazing hymns, and there would be an organ player playing, and it was just such a blessing to be able to go there and be surrounded by so much classical music, so many beautiful melodies.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, church was just like really into music, and Planet Shakers, very contemporary music.
So you had the whole spectrum. You had the hymns, the traditional hymns, traditional classical music, contemporary Christian music.
Yes.
Well, Planet Shakers worship.
And I loved pop music. So I'm a pop fan still. And I remember growing up listening to the top 40, just following the charts. I think the first album that I bought with my own money was In the Zone by Britney Spears, which is straight down the line pop, but I loved it. And eventually I started discovering that I wanted to write some of these songs, and I wanted to just give it a go. Because at the time, actually...
Yeah, when did you go from just liking music to, hey, maybe I could write some of this, make some up myself?
Well, it was interesting because 12 years old, I wanted to be an author. So I loved Lord of the Rings and Narnia, and I really wanted to write fantasy novels that had Christian themes and just use that as a way to, I guess, encourage people and fill them with hope, because I had experienced that with Lord of the Rings. So I loved language, and as a 12-year-old, I would write these manuscripts. And I would write all these chapter books, and I just loved it. And I think to a certain extent that dream is still alive. I still want to do that. But eventually that dream to use language to inspire people kind of merged into songwriting when my youth leader at the time, he started songwriting. And I just wanted to follow that.
Yeah.
And
we should probably back up. At what point did you become a Christian yourself?
Yeah, good question. So I remember as a 5-year-old kid, I just started going to Sindel Baptist.
Mm-hmm.
I knew about God and I was always curious about God.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember distinctly one of these conversations I had with my friend at school who went to Sindel, and it blew my mind as a 5-year-old kid. He was saying, God is so powerful, he can do anything. And I remember asking him as a kid, is he so powerful that he could even turn a table into water? Like just in one moment. And he's like, yes, which is, I don't know, a 5-year-old kind of concept.
Would come up with that, yeah.
But I remember being so fascinated with God, but it didn't really become a personal decision to follow him and to accept Jesus until I was about 14. I remember I'd started going to this youth group, Planet Boom, and there was an invitation to accept Jesus as Savior and to accept him into your heart. And I remember for weeks and weeks and weeks, I was so self-conscious and I was so afraid to make that decision and to step out and to go down the front because I didn't know what people would think of me, and I was just kind of bound by fear. And I remember one night, it had just gone on for so long, and I remember hearing the voice of God just say, like, if you give me one step, if you just take one step out of your seat, I'll take the rest. And I remember doing that and acting on that, and it was just so beautiful because I did take one step, and then I found myself at the front just praying this prayer to thank Jesus for the price that he paid on the cross and for saving my life and accepting him as my Lord and Savior and my shepherd. And so that was the moment as a 14-year-old kid that really changed my life.
You're listening to The Story. Today, Eric Scatterbo is chatting with Grammy award-winning singer and songwriter Mitch Wong, who's sharing his life journey. We'll hear more of his story when we return.
The Story.